Let's get started. So this webinar that we're going to be doing for you is our 10 favorite, and I think we're actually probably going to go a little over 10. This is really the grouping, a minimum of 10 exercises that Kyle and I have found incredibly beneficial for overcoming overuse injuries of the shoulder, improving shoulder, thoracic spine postural issues, and ultimately transferring all this stuff to better performance with a barbell on your back or a barbell in your hands, or any type of resistance training modality. So before we get into the drills, I want to give you a little bit of a framework for how we're going to organize this, because some of it might not be the way that you might anticipate us to take it this direction. We're going to first start with breathing. Breathing is going to be the foundation of your shoulder health. Now, that's not to say that just by improving your breathing, you're going to fix any shoulder pain that you might be having or any pec pain that you might be having, but breathing is the thing that determines how frequently loaded your accessory breathing muscles are. So your accessory breathing muscles are all of the muscles that are surrounding your shoulder complex. It's going to be your traps, it's going to be your rhomboids, upper back, pecs, all of these muscles that fire when you breathe with non-diaphragmatic breathing patterns. Diaphragmatic breathing is what some people refer to as belly breathing, right? It's actually using your full diaphragm and creating 360 degrees of expansion while you breathe. The opposite of that is kind of like chest breathing. Chest breathing is when people create space to breathe, and the problem with that is anytime you breathe into your chest, it's not just about where the air is going, but it's how those muscles are firing. And when we chest breathe, as Kyle just showed you, we have traps that begin to elevate, we have rhomboids that get tight, we have even some of our neck flexors, even maybe neck extensors, depending on how you do it, are going to be overloaded. And that's a big problem when we're talking about shoulder function. So breathing is the foundation for us, and it's also important for scapular function. Now, turn around for me, Kyle. You don't have to take your shirt off or anything. The scapulas glide across the rib cage. Okay, they move anytime the upper arm bone moves. And this upper arm bone is, and the way that it functions with scapula, we refer to as scapulohumeral rhythm. If you want this scapula to function well, you have to have a mobile rib cage. Now, that's probably something that, unless you guys have been following us for a long time or been to one of our seminars, you may not quite understand that, and I'm going to hopefully break it down for you here a little bit. Your ribs are designed to expand and contract through normal respiration. If they do not expand and contract, maybe they're a little tight, between each rib is tissue, is muscle, is connective tissue that is designed to move. If that tissue doesn't move, it's very easy for you to slip into those accessory breathing muscles, and it likely limits how well the scapulas move. Because the ribs, we often think about kind of on the front of our body, but the posterior rib cage is very, very important for thoracic function. If these ribs are not expanding and contracting during normal respiration, the scapulas aren't going to move as well as they could, and you're likely to experience excessive thoracic tightness that is going to impede the way that your shoulders function. If we have excessive thoracic tightness, and just stand to the side for me here, Kyle. Here we go, cameraman. Flex forward, Kyle. This is kind of exaggerated, but you can imagine someone who maybe has a forward head posture. They are somebody who is kind of stuck in this kyphotic position. The thoracic spine sets the foundation for how well the shoulder joint moves. If the thoracic spine is not mobile, you are going to experience immediate restrictions with how your shoulders function. You will not be able to get fully overhead. You will not be able to get into full shoulder extension. And the first thing you're actually going to lose is shoulder rotation or external rotation and internal rotation. Shoulder internal rotation is incredibly important for pressing. It's incredibly important for bench pressing and overhead pressing, as well as rowing and other things. A lot of people chase external rotation, and for good reason. You need good shoulder external rotation if you want to hold a bar on your back, like a back squat, or if you want to do other exercises in the weight room. So the way that we're going to take this is we are going to show you shoulder drills that we really like, but we're going to start with breathing, and then we're going to look at the thoracic spine, and then we're going to go into your actual shoulder complex, and that's exactly how you guys should address shoulder issues with yourself or with your clients. It's not just a shoulder issue. Very few people have just a shoulder issue. It's something that drove the shoulder issue. So if you have shoulder pain, say if we have anterior shoulder pain or any type of delt type pain, we don't necessarily ask the question of what hurts, but we ask the question of why does it hurt? That's a crucial component to being able to fix these things. Because if you only focus on what hurts, it's easy for us to get out of pain, but we have to dig deeper to figure out what drove that pain. What was the reason that pain occurred? For the majority of people, that's going to be rooted in their breathing patterns and in their thoracic spine function. Anything you have to add on that, Coach Kyle, before we get into some of the more practical things?
No, not really. But just to recap, right, we need to breathe and breathe well. And then we can start to assess how that scapula is moving in and around the body. And that's a great warm-up for whatever task you have in the gym. Right, we're going to make sure that this breathing and bracing is functioning well because we have to breathe as we're training, obviously, but then we can assess those other parts. Think about it like starting with a big fish and then expanding into the smaller, even muscles.
Yep.
Not necessarily muscles, but think start global and expand into the smaller areas.
Yep. Now the thoracic spine has a normal flexion-based curvature to it, but we get in trouble when we get to points of excessive flexion. And kind of show them what that looks like, Kyle. Excessive flexion is going to be a little bit of this forward lean, kind of rounding your upper back. That's what we call hyperkyphotic posture. The opposite of that is just as problematic, and that's actually hypokyphotic posture. Hypokyphotic posture is somebody who has a very stiff thoracic spine. This is very common with our strength athletes. These are individuals who have probably know the importance of maintaining a rigid spinal position so they stay really tall all of the time. But your thoracic spine is designed to move and bend. And if it's not able to move and bend, we're going to run into problems with shoulder function. So the first place we're going to start, and there's a whole lot more that I think Kyle and I will probably dive into in terms of lecture as we're going, but we want to make this as practical as possible for you guys versus turning it into like an hour and a half pure lecture. So the first place we're going to start is with breathing. And for Kyle, I'm going to get him set up in a round back breathing drill. Go ahead and get on the floor, Kyle. Now the round back breathing drill is mostly focused on thoracic spine and posterior rib cage expansion. Now what I'm going to get Kyle to do is to sit kind of on his calves, and I want his elbows touching his knees. So what I've done is I've intentionally rounded his back because I want him biasing his air into this region. What I'm going to coach Kyle to do now is take deep, probably 6 to 8 count inhales through his thoracic spine, and I want this tissue to expand and contract. And we're going to give Kyle probably about 5 to 6 of these while I kind of continue talking about it. If you're somebody who is stuck in that hyperkyphotic position or hypokyphotic position, this is generally where you should start because we need to make sure the ribs are mobile enough to support mobile scapulas, and we need to make sure that the rib cage and thoracic spine is mobile enough to support the shoulder girdle. So it all starts with breathing. Well, you could also do and you should, if you are very locked up, you should do some soft tissue work. Think about like accumobility ball work, lacrosse ball work through the thoracic spine, even foam roller. It doesn't matter what you do. Everyone has kind of their favorite modality, but you just need something that's going to change tissue tone. I like breathing because you need to improve the overall pattern of breathing if you are someone who gets stuck in that shallow type breathing pattern. But you should do the breathing work on top of the soft tissue mobilizations. The next place that we're going to go, and we don't have to spend a whole lot of time on breathing. If you are somebody who has kind of that stuck posture, you should probably do a little bit prior to training, maybe a little bit at night. But once you've done it, it's time to move on into more stability-based drills and more drills that can capture greater ranges of motion. So what we're going to do, Kyle, you want to grab the foam roller for this one? We're going to do a little bit of T-spine extension work. And we'll be right back on the ground here.
Do you want this off the chair?
Actually bring the chair over. Yeah, let's grab the chair over. Now, typically we do this on a bench, but a chair will work just fine for our purposes here. We stated that shoulder function starts with the thoracic spine. So we have to address thoracic spine before we start tackling shoulder rotation, flexion, or extension. We have to address thoracic spine. The simplest drill that we have here is a thoracic spine extension drill. Again, this works a little bit better on a bench, but this is we have a chair in here today. It's a little easier for us to just grab a chair. What I'm going to have Kyle do, though, is focus on extending through T-spine. Now, you're not going to get a whole lot more than what Kyle already has. It is kind of a myth that you need to extend your thoracic spine. In fact, the thoracic joints are flexion bias joints, so you can only kind of get to neutral. You really can't get beyond neutral. If you were to extend any further, it's actually going to happen through the TL junction. TL junction is the thoracic lumbar junction. It's kind of this section of your spine. This section of your spine is very bendy. This section of your spine is not very bendy except for forward bend. So what we need to make sure we do is to set up a little bit of a brace, because I can't have the extension that Kyle's creating come from lumbar spine. It has to be from thoracic spine. What we're going to do now is a contract relax method. Kyle's going to hold at the biggest extended position that he can, which is hopefully going to be kind of upright or neutral, and I'm going to cue him to press his sternum into the ground. I want him to press his chest into the ground as hard as he can, and he's going to hold that as hard as possible for about an 8 to 10 count. Once he comes off of that 8 to 10 count, he's going to go to the relax phase and he's going to rest. Now, between phases, your goal is to get into a deeper range of motion and hold that position. Now, if you want to take this a step further and you want to start targeting the shoulders while you do this, what we would actually do is have you hold a PVC pipe or a band or something like that. And Kyle, go ahead and get back on there for me.
You want to grab shoulder rock?
Nah, just go ahead and get on here. I'll just demo it. You could, like Kyle was just saying, hold a shoulder rock, a PVC pipe, or really what we're after is separating these hands as far as possible. Now, what I'm going to ask Kyle to do is to resist me. Now, I'm pushing him outward. Okay, I'm going to push these hands outward. His job is to resist. That's going to light up his rear delts. As I'm doing this, Kyle's forcing his rear delts wider and wider. That begins to work on shoulder external rotation while we work on the thoracic spine. And I will go ahead and grab that shoulder rock there, Kyle. There you go.
This is a great one, getting a little more bang for your buck, addressing two major areas at one point in time.
Yep. So in this position, and if you guys have a really tight thoracic spine, or if you have tight lats or shoulders, you're going to feel a massive lat stretch. Now, this is not intended to stretch your lats. If you feel a lat stretch in this position, though, that's kind of a problem, and you need to essentially spend a little bit more time with it. But when Kyle adds the shoulder rock, or again, PVC pipe or a dowel rod, something like that, we start to work on shoulder external rotation, which is an added benefit in this drill. Nice job, Kyle. Anything else to add on T-spine extension?
Think about all the articulations, and this goes back to our round back breathing. There's so many ribs that wrap around and grab into this fused point. On the back side, there's all those ribs, so many articulations that wrap around and touch the spine. So if we can get general movement in this area here, you're affecting so many small articulations. That's one of the reasons we get such a good bang for our buck with those.
Yep. Now, sticking on the thoracic spine, before we get into specifics with the shoulder, we're going to talk thoracic rotation. Kyle, we're going to have you go forearm on the ground. We're going to have you go on the knees and come out just a little bit like your rotation drills, not your breathing drills. There you go. Kind of a similar position that we started in, but now we're going to work thoracic rotation. What we like to coach in this type of a drill is to press hard through the ground through your forearm and hand. From this position, Kyle's going to anchor himself through the ground with that hand, and he's going to rotate as high as he can. Hold this top position here, Kyle. Now what we're going to do is a contract relax method. Kyle's going to hold this position. He's going to stare at his elbow, and he's not just stretching here. Like, he needs to be actively working to get that shoulder and elbow as high as possible. This should be a hard drill for him to do. He's going to come off tension now. Same thing we did with the thoracic extension drill, and he's going to kind of chill out here. Once he's kind of recovered, because it should be hard, effort is the most important thing, he's going to go back into it, and his goal is to get into a larger range of motion. Thoracic rotation is incredibly important if you work with any athletes who throw, baseball players, some track athletes, anybody who is throwing, reaching behind their body, and for normal gait, it's really, really important that your thoracic spine is mobile with rotation. Show them the other side here, Kyle. And actually, stick on that same side for just a second and hold that top position. Now, this is another thing that we like to do in this position is if I have somebody who we've identified as kind of restricted breathing, we're not going to go to the extreme of like trying to get Kyle as high as possible, right? We're going to let him hang out into a comfortable range, and we're going to practice breathing laterally through the side of his rib cage. So if you did have rib cage tightness or anything like that, this is an opportunity for you to work on breathing within that position. And the same thing, we would probably do 10, 15 breaths, anywhere from a 6 to 8 count inhale, and just kind of let your air flow out naturally. You don't have to press it out or do anything like that from a tempo standpoint. But go ahead and do the other side here, Kyle. Now, the other thing that we do with thoracic rotation drills is we assess left to right function. What we want to identify is, one, how much rotation do we have? And number two, we want to identify, do we have equal amounts of rotation from left to right? If we don't have equal rotation left to right, that's a problem because it probably looks like kind of a twisting when you press. Maybe it's an unequal front rack position, or maybe one elbow might be a little higher in your back squat. We need to always assess left to right function when it comes to the shoulders and when it comes to the hips, but we're not talking hips today. We grab that kettlebell, Kyle, and the foam roller. We're going to show you guys one more rotation drill that we really like, and then we're going to move on to the actual specific shoulder stuff. But again, you guys really need to spend your time with these thoracic drills prior to jumping into the shoulders, because the thoracic spine is going to be the thing that determines how permanent the changes you make to the shoulders are once you've done the drills. And go rotation with knee on the foam roller.
Hopefully you guys can see how hard I was working there. Just to recap off, the effort we're putting in. It's not just an in range of motion flow drill. I'm really holding that, fighting for millimeter by millimeter, centimeter by centimeter, inch by inch, whatever I can give. The only thing I have to add to the rotation drill, this next one we're going to show you takes this problem out, but it's really important that I anchor this hand and I don't find rotation and shifting in my hips to get an extra range of motion. Remember, we're talking mobility through here, just like with the elbows up on the bench or the chair. We don't need mobility here. This area needs to be locked down, set a small initial brace, and just make sure you're not shifting to get that extra range of motion. It really needs to come out of that challenging segment in your spine.
Now, this next drill is a little bit more of the same, but it's one that we really like. What we're going to have Kyle do here is place his knee on top of a foam roller. If you don't have a foam roller, you can go ahead and stack your knees on top of each other. It works pretty well. It's not as good, but it works okay. His goal, though, is to press as hard as he can through this foam roller. It's really, really important that that knee doesn't travel off the foam roller. We have a small kettlebell in his hand. A dumbbell works too, but we just want to anchor that position. From there, Kyle's going to reach as far as he can this way. This is not just a stretch, guys. Anytime you do these drills, do not treat them like stretches. You really need to work at it. So as Kyle's doing this, he should be actively reaching as far as he can this way and trying to capture more range of motion. We don't want to just hang out and static stretch in that position, even if it feels good. We want to treat this as almost as a stability exercise and put effort forward so you actually capture more range of motion. And again, go and transition to the other side there, Kyle. Same thing here, we're going to assess left to right. And this one we would also do some breathing work in. So we don't have to work quite as hard here, Kyle. We're going to talk breathing in this pattern. So if you guys did assess like, hey, I'm someone who breathes into my chest or I breathe shallowly, we will take an opportunity at this point to practice breathing laterally through this rib cage and through the obliques. Kyle's going to not reach as hard as possible here. He is going to kind of hang out, but again, this is more passive. This is something that's more restorative. This is not necessarily a warm-up. This is something we would do in the recovery process. or something that we would do to improve our breathing patterns, which again, breathing and thoracic mobility are going to set the foundation for how well your shoulders work. So, with that said, why don't we transition to the banded dead bug for our start with the shoulders?
Cool.
For that?
Yep.
And guys, as we're going through this, Kyle's going to go grab a couple tools for this next one. But let us know if you have questions on the shoulders, or if anything isn't quite clicking for you, or if you have specific issues that you'd like us to talk about. Micro, yep. Go ahead and show them how you tie it up here, Kyle.
So we're just looking for a knot right in the middle of it. Doesn't have to be perfectly centered, but the closer to center I can get, the better it's going to be for balance.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to sit right behind
Yep.
shoulders, my back.
Right there. Okay, Kyle's going to get on the ground in kind of a dead bug position. I want to talk about why this is a shoulder drill for you guys. So in this position, Kyle has that knot kind of in his mid-back. He's going to get into the dead bug position. Now, what we're doing here is teaching someone how to get into shoulder flexion, which is your overhead press position or your pull-up position. We want to teach people how to get there without the mobility coming from rib cage or thoracic spine. We want the shoulders to be able to move through a full range of motion, kind of like this or like this, without the thoracic spine arching. If you're someone who overhead presses and you have to extend your back to get to end range, that's a lack of mobility, firstly at the thoracic spine, but secondarily with overhead flexion. So this drill is going to set a foundation to teach you how to get overhead without extending the spine. Because if you extend your spine while doing this drill, the band's going to come up and smack you right in the back of the head. We're going to see how close to the ground we can get Kyle in this drill. Go ahead. This is where it gets fun for Kyle because he has to work a little bit. Straighten out those arms for me, Kyle. Straighten out those arms, tension in the band. He's going to move slowly, and he's going to keep his rib cage down, and I want him holding end range here. Okay, he's going to get as close to the ground as he can. Again,
So close.
he's pretty close. You don't need a heavy band for this. Go and extend your back here, Kyle, and kind of cheat a little bit if you can. Yeah, a little easier, and you can even see a little bit more range of motion was captured once Kyle did that. He can rest on the ground, but I want him keeping these ribs down the whole time because we're working shoulder mobility. I don't want the extension coming from his thoracic lumbar junction. Nice job, Kyle.
Press down again. That was a really good demonstration. If I hold that right there.
Yep, so check out Kyle's passive shoulder mobility. His hands are on the ground. This is with his rib cage flared up and extended. That's not shoulder mobility. That's like rib cage flaring that's happening. If I press Kyle's rib cage down into a neutral position, this is where his actual active range of motion is. And what we want is to eventually get Kyle's hands to the floor. This would all, so if you guys struggle, and can you kind of show them what extending spine looks like when they press, Kyle? Like just kind of turn to the side. So if you see somebody who, or yourself, kind of extends to press, that's a compensation due to a lack of overhead end range shoulder flexion. Similarly, if you're someone who presses and your end position is like a bent elbow position, show them what that looks like, Kyle. You finish and your elbows are kind of in this bent end range position. You can't quite get fully overhead. That's also firstly, that's a deficit of thoracic mobility. Secondarily, though, overhead shoulder flexion, which this drill is kind of teaching you to work on.
Really like that demonstration, especially with a little bit of a baggy shirt on. You may not have been able to see, how much curvature is in my back. It might have looked like, oh, that person has fairly straight, fairly neutral spine until Brandon manipulated my rib cage and actually pushed me into a true neutral position or a lot closer to it. And then all of a sudden there's a loss of, 3-4 inches of range of motion. Mm-hmm. So it can be really, really tricky, but that's why we put so much emphasis on the T-spine because it can be hard to see if I'm standing and it looks like I'm fairly neutral. I'm not in this position, it's fairly neutral, but the difference between being here and here, again, is inches of range of motion in mobility in that shoulder capsule.
Yeah, perfect. So the next one we're going to show you guys is similar to that drill. Again, the way that we organize these drills is pretty linear. So if you did, or if let's say you had no idea where you should start to work on your shoulders, this sequence that we're taking you through is exactly what you should follow. The next one we're going to show you is actually going to be utilizing the wall, and this one is going to be kind of like a dead bug. We actually call it the wall bug. Go figure, because we're on the wall. You don't need a foam roller for this, but we find that a foam roller adds a nice element of instability. But we're still working on the same thing. So if you are somebody who, again, extends your back, or if you're somebody who extends your back to get under a bar when you're back squatting, these are the two drills that you should be doing to start to work on that. We're going to get Kyle on this foam roller, and he's going to be probably... get a little closer to the wall, Kyle. He's going to be about 6 inches away from the wall with the top of his head. That's going to ensure that he can press kind of from this position versus his arms fully extended. The foam roller adds lateral instability so that you're forced to press through both hands. We really like close chain shoulder mobility exercises or stability exercises, but again, this one's not exactly to mobilize the shoulders, but it's to teach you how to create stability at the shoulder joint without extending your spine, which is crucial if you want to have a good overhead press. Go ahead and go through it, Kyle. Dead bug position. And you're not going to see a whole lot happening here other than Kyle just holding this position. But what we want him to do is to press as hard as possible through this drill. We're going to tell Kyle to press the wall away from him. Try to press the wall as hard as possible. Again, this is not just a balance drill. We want him to actually work as hard as possible. If this is easy for you guys when you do this, we can add a little bit more difficulty with leg and hip movement. Go ahead and show him with a leg drop here, Kyle. Start position. Kyle's going to press into the wall as hard as he can, and he's going to slowly lower his leg to the ground. As he slowly lowers it, this is going to increase the demand for stability to occur at the shoulder joint. Again, if you don't know where to start or what to do these drills in the exact order that we are showing you guys them here today. Cool.
And that should not be a easy passive drill. You should be really working hard to push that wall over.
Yep. Now, if you guys are going to do that one, that's going to be for your prep work. Okay, this is something you do right before training. You should spend about 5 minutes doing it, no more, and you should do it with as much effort as possible. Let's go armbar here, Kyle. Now we're going to get into the actual shoulder mobilization drills and shoulder stability drills for you guys. This one is called the armbar. What we're going to do is get a light kettlebell. A dumbbell works too, but we kind of like the position of the kettlebell in terms of it, in terms of where it kind of anchors your shoulder joint at. What we're going to get Kyle to do though is to rotate, and I like to coach this as scrubbing that upper arm bone, the humerus, through the shoulder joint. And what we need to pay attention to as you guys do this is that movement isn't just coming from the wrist. So I'm going to lock Kyle's shoulder down, and you'll see that he can still move quite a bit. Okay, even more so if I let his elbow flow. There's no movement occurring at the shoulder here, so you guys need to pay attention to that. Instead, we're going to coach Kyle to lock this in position, and we're going to rotate at the shoulder joint. Watch movement occur at the shoulder joint. He's going to go into internal rotation and external rotation. He's not going to jam himself into either side, but he's going to slowly scrub that capsule and begin to free up a little bit of capsular range of motion. Now, if you guys feel a lot of clicking in your shoulder, or if it's uncomfortable, try going a little bit lighter and a little bit slower and using less of a range of motion in that. So that's going to be our shoulder armbar. And again, we would do this prior to training, prior to pressing or overhead pressing, even back squatting. Let's show them armbar with press here, Kyle. So we're going to get Kyle in a similar position. Again, we're kind of taking these linearly, and don't go to the hardest version yet. We're going to get Kyle in this side post position. So we said earlier, this side post position, you have to press as hard as you can through the ground. With that bottom hand, I need Kyle trying to press the ground away from him. That's going to bring stability to this shoulder. What I don't want Kyle to do is to passively hang out on his scapula, kind of like that. Don't be passive here, guys. Press through the forearm, press through the hand as hard as possible. And we're going to get that kettlebell kind of behind Kyle. Now what we're working on is shoulder external rotation and scapular retraction in this position. This is the drill that you need if you struggle with your back squat rack position. If I were to pause Kyle at the bottom of the rep, this is going to be about, not quite perfect, but this is a relative position that he might hold a bar on his back. So we're trying to find things that mimic positions. And what we really recommend you guys go heavy here too. We didn't grab the heaviest kettlebell for Kyle, but typically we want to go pretty heavy on this drill. Now if we want to take this a step further, he brought it over, that's right. If we want to take this a step further, we would start on this post position, but we're actually going to get into the high post position here and make this a little bit more challenging. Again, use a heavy kettlebell because this is not just a side plank drill, and we're pressing from behind the back. I want Kyle getting his elbow as far behind his back as possible. This is a very powerful external rotator, so if you are someone who kind of has this closed in posture, maybe this forward shoulder type position, you're kind of stuck in the internal rotation and scapular elevation, this is going to get you into external rotation and scapular retraction. Those are the two qualities that you need to hold a bar on your back when you back squat. Anything else to add to that one, Kyle?
No, this shoulder feels really good.
Cool. We would typically do those for anywhere from 3 to 5 reps. Again, you have to go heavy. If Kyle was doing this prior to a training session, I'd have him with a 40-pound kettlebell, maybe a 50-pound kettlebell. So just to give you kind of a marker for how much load we should be getting into. Let's go banded wall angel press here, Kyle. We're going to transition back to the wall. Kyle's going to grab that band that he already tied a knot into, and he's going to get it in kind of the same position that he was in just a minute ago. Go and get that on your back there, Kyle. He's going to pin that band on the wall without extending his back. From here, he's going to get into a neutral position, and he's going to work on pressing all the way overhead. This one's pretty challenging. Take it slow. The band's going to keep you honest. Again, we're trying to avoid extending the spine, and I want Kyle getting all the way overhead under load. Some work, huh, Kyle? Now this drill becomes very easy if you extend your back. And if you do this drill with a band, you'll know if you extend your back pretty quickly because the band will come up and pop you in the back of the head. So it's kind of like a nice teaching tool there. With that one, I won't ask Kyle to do that here. He's probably wondering if he has to go through that. But we would do this to prep for overhead pressing, even your back squat rack position, and any other overhead type positions you might want to get your shoulders into.
Because I do have very tight shoulders, I have to highlight this. It's not as easy to see with a front and a side angle camera here, but my hips are, I don't know, 8 to 10 inches off the wall. I'm not on the wall. My feet are also quite a bit away from the wall. Yeah. That's the position I have to be in to maintain that drawn down ribcage position that Brandon demonstrated or forced me into on the 4 version of this. As I go overhead, same thing. I'm going a little bit lighter so I can talk here, but I'm not moving my back. My feet and my hips are away from the wall. Mm-hmm. If you had better shoulder mobility than me, you would be able to get your feet closer to the wall. Ideally, feet would be touching the wall, hips, shoulders touching the wall. Yep. No rib cage flare, overhead position.
Go ahead and get that behind your back again, Kyle. I want to have you do this off the wall, and I'm going to hold it in position so they can see rib cage position. Turn around. And now, give me the back of it. So what I'm going to do is kind of show you, and get to the side here, Kyle. Yep. I'm going to hold that band there just as kind of the wall did for Kyle. Go ahead and go overhead here, Kyle. And this is kind of what we're looking for from the end range position. We use the wall just because you probably don't have someone to hold that band on your back, but this is what we want to get to. Go ahead and extend your back, Kyle. It gets very easy for Kyle to get into that overhead position if he extends his back, but you'll notice that the range of motion didn't come from the shoulder joint itself, which is what we're mobilizing. It came from thoracic spine, which is what we're trying to avoid. Let's go with wall slides, hands on the wall. Actually, let's go wall angel while you have that. Banded wall angel. So staying in the similar position, this is a kind of a similar drill, although the difference between this drill and the one that we just did is how much shoulder external rotation is required. So if you're somebody who is limited in your shoulder external rotation, you can't get really wide, this is the drill that you should do. We have Kyle in a very wide externally rotated position. He's loaded with the band, and his goal is to pin his arms on the wall and slowly slide up and slowly slide down while keeping contact with the wall the whole time. Again, this is a drill that you cannot extend your back with. You'll know if you do immediately because the band, once again, will snap you right in the back of the head.
Same position. If you really struggle with it, can't get elbow and wrist, not hand, elbow and wrist to the wall, you need to move your hips off the wall and your feet off the wall, maintain your best neutral spine position.
Yep. We got about 3 more drills for you guys here. If I'm keeping count, we probably did over 10. Let's go hands on the wall sliding. Next one that we're going to show you is one that we would pattern scapular upward rotation. Now, a lot of people, if you have immobile scapulas, you're going to dip into scapular elevation. This is scapular elevation. Upward rotation happens when the scapulas tilt upward, kind of like this when you overhead press. That's elevation. Relax here for a second, Kyle. Scapular upward rotation, if you move through an overhead range of motion effectively, this scapula kind of tilts upward and glides kind of like this. If you are missing that quality, the scapula is actually going to shrug up your back and you're going to get kind of in this position at the top. That's what we want to avoid. This is what that drill is teaching you to do. I have Kyle's hands planted on the wall. He's going to push into the wall as hard as he can, and he's going to move one arm at a time, slowly overhead. It's important to note that with both hands, Kyle's pressing his forearm and hand into the wall as hard as possible. Now, again, when we have these left to right drills, we are going to assess left to right function. If you're somebody who's missing a range of motion on one side, your hand might get about here, but what you'll also find is that the other hand will get much higher or lower. So we want to assess function left to right. Again, this is starting to work scapular upward rotation, which is a key quality to any overhead press type movement. Let's go wall slides on this, Kyle. Do that and go ahead and loop that mini band around your hands. Either one's fine. Now the next one that we're going to show you guys is another shoulder wall slide rolling type drill. We're going to get foam roller on the wall. Kyle's going to be kind of in the same position, and we're going to get him hooked up with this mini band around his wrists.
If you were really wide and good mobility, better than mine, could probably go with a double. For me, I'm going to have to triple it up. Even though that's going to increase the intensity, It's going to get me in a better position for my actual external rotation.
Hold this and just hold position for a second, Kyle, while I talk about it. Now, what we're going to work here is Kyle, because you can't really see his hands here, is going to be kind of in this position. It's crucial that you don't let the elbow creep outside of your hand in this position. In this position, we're working shoulder external rotation. That's what the band is resisting. Kyle's pressing into the band to resist shoulder external rotation. If your elbows creep outside of the hand, you're starting to dip into shoulder internal rotation, which is an important quality, but that's not what we're working in this drill. So very, very important that the elbows stay perfectly below the hands and you don't end up pressing like this. Kyle should be trying to separate that band as hard as possible. And as we can see, the band's kind of beating him at the top. So you saw hands kind of creep in a little bit. Elbows were a little wide. If we were training Kyle or assessing him and not just demoing things, we would make him spend a little bit more time in that position. You don't need a foam roller for this. It's just kind of nice to slide up a wall. You can do it with just a wall instead. Is there any other wall slide variations that I'm not thinking of? Those are kind of the key ones. All right, guys, final drill for you coming in here. This is going to be our oblique to bear transition. This is one of our favorite global shoulder mobilizers, and it's probably the hardest of all of them. So as you've seen, we've built these shoulder drills in a fairly linear timeline. We started with breathing, we started with thoracic function, then we started to get into some banded dead bug variations to plug in the core to the shoulder. Now we're going to get into more challenging, a more challenging stability drill. We're going to get Kyle, go ahead and just start in the bear position. Won't make you go all the way through it. Kyle's going to be in the bear crawl position. From here, he's going to, bring knees off of the ground, and he's going to transition from bear to what we call the high oblique position. Just go through a couple reps here, Kyle, so people can see it. Kyle should be pressing into the ground as hard as he can on that down hand. Show him what like passively going into that scapula looks like. Don't shrug into the scapula. Don't sit passively like this. The cue that we're going to use is to press the ground away as far as you can. I want that shoulder to be as far away from your head as you possibly can. This is the position, not this. You're not going to reap any benefit from this drill other than just making it a hard oblique drill if you kind of shrug in this position. So we're going to torture Kyle here for a minute, and we're going to show you exactly how we would do this drill to prep for something. What we wouldn't do, just bounce between like a couple reps really fast. What we don't really want to do is just kind of bounce in and out. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong about this, but what we're looking for our strength athletes is positional tolerance within the joints. So go and go with a couple paused reps here, Kyle. Pause at whatever stage you want. We're going to ask Kyle to pause 3 times through a single rep. He's going to pause here for about a 5 count before he continues. He's going to pause here for about a 5 count. Again, we're working positional integrity, spending more time in hard positions. And then finally, he's going to pause in this position. This is incredibly challenging, but this is working on like very full shoulder rotation in really all of the qualities that you need as a strength athlete. So that would be the final progression that we would take you guys to. If you get good at these drills, a lot of your shoulder issues are going to be resolved. However, you can't just mobilize or have a perfect movement plan if your training volume is crazy or if you're choosing the wrong exercises. So this is only part of the equation for improving shoulder function. If you're still crushing yourself with 3 to 5 days of pressing a week and your volume's really high, you'll never undo that. So if you are having shoulder pain, the first thing that we look at is training volume, training load, and then we do all of these things concurrent to that. Coach Kyle, anything to add to these fine folks before we sign off?
Yeah, on that same note, bad posture throughout the day. We can spend, what do we have here? 40 minutes of great shoulder mobility, stability drills, and that already has me feeling better. But if the rest of the day I sit with my shoulders in this position, I'm doing a lot more holding them here than I'm ever going to fight pulling them open. So make sure as you start to open up that T-spine and those shoulders, you really stay in that ideal position as much as possible throughout the day. Driving, sitting, working, etc.
Yep. All right, guys. So that wraps up this live webinar on shoulder function. We'll ask if you have any questions to drop them in there right now, and we'll spend just a few minutes answering them. If you don't have any questions, email Kyle or I at coaching@kabukistrength.com.
Question from Michael. I had shoulder surgery in April, luckily only bone spurs, but I ended up with scapular winging. It has gotten better, but I still have it. Any recommendations?
Yeah, so the question, if you guys couldn't hear it, was I recently had shoulder surgery. I now have scapular winging. What can we do to fix it? And I'll show you how we fix it. Kyle, get on the ground for me here. Now, if you have hardware in your shoulder joint, if you had a shoulder replacement, something like that, we're not fixing that with just drills. We can improve range of motion over time, but if you have surgery, changes things significantly, especially if we're dealing with scar tissue. But the only way that we've found that you can really improve scapular winging, or it's kind of like it's kind of impossible to show it unless you have it, but it's kind of like this kind of shrugging and like outward protrusion of the scapula. You have to fix that with closed chain shoulder stability exercises. I'll show you one of my favorites here right now. Kyle, this position, high bear position. What I have, Kyle, can you switch this way, Kyle, a little bit? Right there. Yep, back this way. Right there. Okay. Now, so critical that if you struggle with scapular winging, this isn't the only drill you would do, and this is actually a slightly more advanced drill, but it's crucial that you press through the ground as hard as possible because we need to promote stability within the shoulder capsule and scapular joint. From here, I'm going to have Kyle brace. I'm going to coach him to be long through his spine, and he's going to come onto his toes only and raise his knees off the ground. A little higher, higher. This position, he's holding that position. This is incredibly challenging. Press through the ground as hard as possible and be as long through your spine as much as you can in this drill. Hold that for maybe another 2 count, Kyle. Good. Relax. Knees down, stay in that position. I'm going to have Kyle do 1 more rep. Press up anytime you're ready, Kyle. You'll notice that he didn't shrug scapulas up or anything like that. He needs to press through the ground, high hip position, and own the position. The next one that we'll do is a bear crawl, like a backwards bear crawl. And I'll just have Kyle do 1 or 2 reps of that, but similar idea. So imagine we were just in that position. We're going to make it a little harder. So say you did that drill. This would be where we would take you next. Get in the bear position, Kyle. I'm going to have Kyle, I'm going to be very anal about his position. I don't want him rocking back and forth. Okay, don't take this drill quickly. You need to move incredibly slow. And I'm going to, as Kyle pushes back, hold on just a second, Kyle. Get in the bear position again. As Kyle pushes back, though, he has to press through the ground as hard as possible with his down hand, and he's going to pause there. Hold, and he's going to pause and own position. Again, he's pressing through the ground as hard as he can. Slowly go into another rep, Kyle. Back again, further. Good. Press through the ground as hard as you can on that hand again. That's the only way you're receiving a benefit from this drill. Otherwise, it's just going to be kind of a hard, sucky position to hold. So the point of both of those drills and any drills that you choose to improve scapular winging has to be closed chain. Well, I would say it doesn't have to be. There's other ways to improve it, but that's the easiest way to improve it.
Yeah, you'll get a lot more bang for your buck that closed chain. It looks really simple. If you do it with effort, very, very challenging movement. Not just with torso position, shoulder mobility, but the stability of the scapula. It has to do its job if you nail those positions correctly.
Yep. Other questions?
Lots of thank yous, and will there be more of these webinars?
Yeah, so we just started doing more webinars like this. We have a handful more planned that we haven't announced yet, so just kind of pay attention to what we're doing. And besides that, yeah, there'll be more of them. Thanks for hanging out with us, guys. If you have questions, send them to coaching@kabukistrength.com, and we'll see you all later.